Hi, Rachel.
Hello, Ian. We're back.
We're back after a long absence. We thought it was time that maybe we had another of our healing conversations.
Indeed. So in this one, we have in previous ones sometimes spoken to the fact that we are healing, that we might need something, that we might need to understand, but we've also spoken to the practitioner as well. And this one's definitely speaking to the practitioner. One of the things that we really want to explore today is some of the difficulties and challenges that we see coming up for practitioners time and time again.
And solutions.
Indeed. What
we
helps with all that? Yeah.
Exactly. What we've seen that makes all of that easier, and so that your experience of practice can and I think has to evolve and transform, because that's how we continue to grow, and it's also enables us to do our work and stay healthy without it being to our own detriment.
Yeah. And we in the last one, which we've just realized was November 2019, which feels like a long time ago. The world has changed a lot in that time. In the last one, we introduced the three principles. We started to talk about this understanding, and it's certainly been something that we feel that we've both of us have experienced has transformed our practice, but has also transformed the experience of being in practice for many people that we've worked with.
Yeah, what have you seen around that, just to get us started? When you came into it, like myself, you'd also studied a lot of things, trained in a lot of things. You'd been an essence practitioner and developer for many years. I'm sure you'd learned many things about, what's helpful and what isn't already. But what was kind of new for you when you came to the principles understanding, or what did it help you to see differently?
That's a nice question. So the first word that came to me as you were saying that was lightness. It was a sense of things falling away that I didn't need to be doing. It was a sense of a lot of rules and beliefs around what healing is, which I started to see were really getting in the way. And a big part of it has been around understanding, if you like, what does the healing?
Okay, say more about that.
So, very often practitioners are under the mistaken belief that they need to fix or heal their clients, that it's on them. But we cannot do the healing for someone else. Healing is a revealing of wholeness. It's a coming into the well-being that's already there. And a lot of holistic therapies can be so focused on techniques and things that we need to do, ways that we need to eat, ways that we need to exercise, meditation that we need to do, practices that we need to have. This kind of sense of the focus being on the doing. And that if we do these things, we will have X, Y, and Z happen. But the power and the potency, it seems to me, is in the being. That there's something about understanding our nature as whole and well, as innately whole and well, that when we start to listen to that, when we start to open up a space where that can be heard, where we can get into communion with that, communicate with that, that our own body being will show us what to do.
So that to me suggests what it opens up is the possibility of a more participatory kind of relationship between practitioner and client, and one in which the lead, if you like, is being taken by the client's own wisdom, not so much by what I or you as a practitioner have learned, and what we might have our ideas, what we think might be helpful, but really it's more important that we help the person to listen into what's right for them, which only they can know.
Yeah. And that bit's crucial, and it so often gets overlooked, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
It can seem as if the person who we're going to see is the person who will provide us with the answers, who knows what to do. And when we are that practitioner, that puts a huge burden on us, and it's an unnecessary burden. The attention is going in the wrong direction. That authority, that person's authority for their own healing is getting put on someone else, or it's getting put onto some technique or some diet or some methodology.
Yeah.
There's a displacement happening.
Which doesn't mean that there isn't a role for expertise and consulting with someone who knows things about a certain area that you don't know about. It doesn't mean that, does it?
No, not at all.
It's just that the relationship to that is somewhat different than maybe the one that we're used to. There isn't that kind of handing over of the authority and the decision making and the responsibility to the practitioner, which as a practitioner, I know what that can feel like, and I'm sure you do as well. I don't think any practitioner, can carry that on behalf of a busy practice, a number of people without feeling burdened by it at some point. And I know it was in my previous work, in my homeopathic days, that was the reason why I got close to burnout at one point. It was just that feeling that I personally was responsible for whether people got better, whether they didn't, and all of that.
Yeah, I had something similar. And I remember someone saying to me very early on, you can't wish them to be well more than they want to be well. And I think what she was gently reflecting to me was I was doing all the work. I was inspiring and building the person's awareness up and then getting them, feeling wonderful in that session and working really hard at that, and then working out the best possible remedy or flower essence or whatever it might be, checking in on them and doing lots of stuff.
But that's interesting you say that, Rachel, because I see a lot of clients doing that too. Right. and sometimes encouraged by the practitioner to do that, because the feeling is that that's how you get better, that it's actually necessary to use a lot of willpower and a lot of discipline, and there's a lot of work involved, maybe uncovering old traumas and working through them, processing stuff. All of that can also become a burden to the client, not only to the practitioner.
Yeah.
So there's something in this understanding that also helps to free the client from that burden too, yeah?
Yeah. So what are we talking about here? If all that doing isn't it, then we're moving in the direction of being. We're moving in the direction of presence, of now. So we've talked before about diagnosis, and we've talked before about how that seems to finish a process by locking it into this term, this name. Like, this is what I've got. And what that doesn't take into account is the fact that we are energy. We're in motion in every single moment, in every single cell of our being. We're in this fluid, energetic thing called life. And everything is shifting all the time. Everything is responsive. And the only place where we can ever be in that is in this moment. But from this moment, we touch everything because there isn't anything else. So it's like this moment leads everywhere, past, future, everything. And this moment heals everything. So when we sit in the potency of this moment and we become really present with what is, this is where we have the potential. This is where things transform. This is where seemingly fixed and solid things unravel. And they seem to particularly do that when there's a quality to that presence, when there's an openness, an attentiveness, a softness, when there's a sense of space and listening. And this isn't about doing. This isn't about sorting things out. Suddenly now we're in this place of communion and realness, where anything can happen. What are you hearing in that?
Many things, actually, but one of the things that I'm hearing is that it just strikes me that it's a much more enjoyable and how it feels to me is a much healthier place for me to hang out as a practitioner, to sit in a place where I'm at ease and I'm open and I'm curious and I'm relaxed, and there's that light-heartedness to the conversation that you talked about. And what's, I think, often surprising for people is that space actually enables really deep healing to take place.
In a moment.
Yeah. It's a strange paradox in a way that the deepest healing often happens within that space of lightness and freedom and openness. It doesn't necessarily take place when we're really serious about it and it gets really heavy, and which is interesting because it's, you know, it's somewhat counterintuitive for people until you get used to it. But it also speaks to me of the difference between going after a solution with the intellectual mind, you know, looking through the lens of either what we already know or what we think this other person knows or what we think we need to know. Because there's so much now, isn't there, you know, that people can access, not just through an individual practitioner, but, you know, by the time they've left your office, they're on Google already searching, you know, looking up, which is amazing that we can do that. On the one hand, we've got access to any kind of information now, which wasn't true before. You know, that just wasn't an option, and now it is. So that can be very empowering, but it can also be unhelpful, I've seen, because it can just be overwhelming for people, and things just get more and more complex in their mind, and you can have so much information that you just don't know where to start. You can't see the wood for the trees. Have you seen something like that too?
Yeah, there's a couple of things just in what you were saying there that triggered something for me. And one is this sense that, yeah, knowledge is up for grabs. There is an abundance of it out there. And a lot of it can be quite contradictory and it can be very confusing. And that's different from knowing. And what we're talking about here is that we can sit in a space with our clients where we point them back to their knowing. And that doesn't mean that all the trainings we've had, I mean, you and I have, between us, had goodness knows how many trainings we've, you know, it doesn't mean that any of that is redundant. But when we're sitting in a space of attentiveness and openness to whatever needs to come through that person at that time, whatever they're coming with, and we haven't got any preconceived ideas about this, we haven't already pre-written the script about what we're going to say to them and what we're going to give them, and we haven't gone and researched loads of stuff. We're just being there with them. Our knowing will come up in response. It's like when we sit there with them, there's something about the quality of that space that allows their knowing to arise and allows our knowing to arise. And wisdom comes in. And insight happens and transformation happens.
Yeah. And we recognize it. I think we all recognize that because it has a feeling of rightness to it. And, you know, it just feels right. It feels timely. It feels appropriate to the needs of the moment. And it's not effortful, is it? Mm-hmm. There's something also quite surprising and beautiful to discover, that it comes easily. It's not something that we have to work hard at. It's something that we become receptive to, mm-hmm. so that we allow it to come to us from within.
Yes.
And I think that's a really interesting thing to touch on as well, because just as we're learning to trust that as practitioners, we're trusting what comes to us. We're trusting if a certain question arises, we're going to ask it because we're trusting that that's the right thing to ask, even if it might not make total sense to the thinking mind, which it often doesn't. But we're also trusting that that person that we're working with has exactly the same capacity, the same faculty. So we're encouraging them to listen into their own inner knowing. But what about in the context of the practitioner? The same thing plays out in terms of how we approach our practice, doesn't it? You know, how do we put it out there, what we're doing? How do we attract clients? How do we build a practice? I started to see that it's the same business, isn't it?
Yeah. Can you say a bit more about that?
Well, yeah, I mean, originally this became visible to me when I was training homeopaths, you know, which I did for many years. And I saw that people would go through a training program and someone would come out and start to build a practice, and there was a relative ease to it. But there were many others where it was a real struggle. But they'd done the same training, and that was kind of intriguing to me. It was like, well, what's the difference? They've learned the same material. And sometimes the ones that had worked really hard as students was the ones who struggled the most as practitioners. It didn't correspond to how much knowledge they'd put into their mind. So again, there was something internal that I got interested in. This is going back, 20 years or so. And at that time, I remember reading the Inner Game books, the Inner Game of Tennis, the Inner Game of Music, I think it was by Tim Galway. And he was the first to kind of alert me to the fact that it's what we're doing on the inside that is kind of invisible to us, that largely determines our experience of what's happening and showing up on the outside. So I had a kind of partial understanding of it there. And so I explored what I call the inner game of homeopathy, which was really looking at mostly what I started to see was all the various ways we get in our own way. And without knowing it, without doing it deliberately, we innocently, we create the experience of struggle. And oftentimes we project that onto the therapy, onto the practice. So a lot of people I know people personally who says, I'm just going to give up homeopathy. Homeopathy is too difficult. It's just too damn complicated. It's too difficult to work with clients, 4 or 5 days a week. It's too draining. And yet there are other people doing it who didn't have any difficulty at all. So again, I knew that it wasn't the thing per se, it was the relationship to it on the inside. So that to me it's been a long exploration for me. But again, understanding the 3 principles, coming to that understanding, it just helped me to join the dots in a way that simplified it all. It just made it really simple, because what it does, it shows you how you're creating your own experience of everything in your life, including your practice. Nothing's excluded from that understanding. These are universal principles. So some people see how it plays out in their own personal life first, and that's really helpful. But if you see it there, after a certain point, it's going to dawn on you, well, actually, what about over here? Any area of life that you might be experiencing as a struggle or as difficult, you can have an insight into that struggle, and you can see through it, and you can see what's been the origin of it. And there's something very, very freeing in that, very liberating in it. And to me, it warms my heart to see practitioners get a glimpse of that, because they rediscover the enthusiasm they had for their work, which they thought had gone forever, you know, and they rediscover that kind of lightness and that passion for it that they had as a beginner. Because it hasn't gone anywhere. It hasn't been lost. There's just other things have been laid on top of it. That's all that's happened. Which, because they're invisible, we don't see that. We just see that it's getting hard work.
Yeah. And one of the things that around that whole area is, you know, how self-conscious we can be as a practitioner. You know, how we're thinking about, oh, well, what am I going to call myself? And am I this kind of practitioner, or am I that kind of practitioner? Or, you know, and what should I put on my blog, and what should I do on this? And there's a lot of kind of thought around how I appear in the world and what I'm going to be in the world. And someone on one of our recent practitioner mentoring space groups talked about this beautifully. She came to the end of those 6 months with us saying, you know, I can treat anyone. Anyone can show up. I don't have to have a niche. I don't have to say I'm this, that, or the other. If we're in client consciousness, rather than being self-conscious, we're client conscious. If we're coming to be with that person exactly as they are, in their pain and in their wholeness, then we just stop having to think about all this other stuff. It's like it can just fall away. It's easier to find our own words to describe ourselves.
Yeah.
And it's easier to attract people because the frequency, the airwaves are clear. You know, there isn't all that stuff getting in the way. I always kind of feel it's a bit of a red flag when I look on a practitioner's website and they're talking about themselves. It's, I do this and I've done this and I've seen this and there's a lot of me. And it usually indicates that that person is still in there, that they're in that area. And really what someone wants when they go to a practitioner's website is to know what they can do for them. The first thing they want to know is, well, what can you do for me? How can you help me? So being client conscious, being open to and aware of and looking in the direction of being with our client takes away a lot of stuff that's otherwise focused in on me.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I think when you're talking about being client conscious, you're not suggesting that we need to have a list of all the things that we can help a person get well from necessarily, because that's another trap, isn't it? Potentially, you know, I've got to think about all the potential ailments and challenges and struggles, you know, pain points the marketers talk about. You know, what are the pain points that you want to kind of appeal to? That's not it, is it? For me, that's not it anyway. For me, it's just about getting really clear on what I'm up to, what I'm about, what I can offer. And of course, you have to make that visible in some sense. People have got to be able to at least look you up somewhere, unless, you know, you've been doing it for long enough that the word of mouth is sufficient. But beyond that, I think there's something that people need to just get a sense of you as much as anything else. It's not so much what you can do, it's a sense of who you are, where you're coming from. And, you know, just like a very short piece, whether it's a written piece or a spoken piece or something like that, that really speaks from the truth of who you are and what you see. And it speaks to that in them. The ones for whom that resonate will hear it and they'll want to work with you. And you won't even know why necessarily, or, you know, specifically, they might not know why, what it is, but they'll feel that there's something in this. There's something
Yeah.
in this that I want to pursue, and it will turn out to be a good fit.
Yeah. So something about giving yourself permission to be who you are, to be your flavor of this, you know, because what you bring is unique. So trying to package and market yourself and trying to be this and that and the other, you know, we hear so much about the imposter syndrome, you know, and I wonder how much those two are related. Whilst when we are sitting in the authentic voice that we have, you know, we're just saying what we see and what we know and what we're passionate about and what we'd really love to help with, then there's something about that that's just really clean and really stable, and people get that, and those for whom it resonates will come to that. They'll be drawn to the simplicity of that and the strength of it and the truth of it. And those who aren't, it doesn't matter. It's not a reflection on you. It's not that you're doing something wrong. You do not have to attract everybody. You attract those you can help. And there's something about just sitting in that and trusting that, because then you can work from your strength. And then it builds. It naturally builds.
Yeah. And again, we've seen that happen, haven't we, with some of the people that we've been working with who've had these kind of struggles with practice, as they've kind of internally settled and relaxed around it, but also got clear on what it is that they do have to offer. Magically, people start showing up, you know. Often not coming from the direction that you were looking to get them from, even. Which is interesting how that works, isn't it? We can be putting all of our energy over it with our marketing and everything towards this niche that we think, you know, those are the ones that I'm going to be working with, and actually there's this queue of people over here just waiting for us to notice and be receptive, you know, just to be open to the fact. I found when I came into the principles in 2011, within a couple of years, I was just amazed how my work just kept opening up and opening up. And I found myself working in all these different settings that I'd never imagined I would ever work in. I found myself teaching it to kids in schools. I don't know how that came about. I, you know, ended up in front of school children, which was great fun. And then I ended up working in corporate sector with another colleague, which again, I'd never done before. I had no experience working in that field. But the work came to me because of my kind of openness to it, and also my readiness. And because I didn't have any thinking that said, that's not for me. You know, I was no longer pushing it away, which I didn't even know I was doing before, but I probably was.
I really relate to that. I had no idea how much of an internal no I had going on until I came to the three principles understanding.
I think we all have a version of that running as practice. We've all got ideas not only about what we think we want and need, but we've also got ideas about what we think isn't for us.
Yeah, and what we think we can do.
Yeah.
You know, there's this tangled package of beliefs that get in the way.
When that gets kind of loosened up somehow, you just relax around it. It's just amazing what starts coming in, and you find yourself just saying yes, because why not? You know, that would be fun.
Yeah, because if all we're doing is turning up and being real and being present, it turns out we can do that with anyone.
Yeah.
It becomes so much simpler. Yeah.
So that is something that we would very much like to share with you in greater depth. If that appeals to you, we have another practitioner mentoring space starting quite soon, which I think is going to be the last one this year, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
As far as I'm aware. So if this resonates for you, you know, reach out, and if you've got any questions, we'd be happy to answer them. But this is very much the field that Rachel and I think the two of us working together with the backgrounds that we have, this is a natural thing for us to be doing, to be offering this to practitioners, because we both got a lot of experience working with practitioners over the years.
Yeah. And the practitioner mentoring space is it's like a it's a place for coming together and untying some of these knots. You know, I think at this time in particular, with everything that's going on, it's very easy to feel isolated as a practitioner. You know, it's like we finish our trainings and then you kind of boot it out into the world and off you go. And it can feel very isolating, it can feel very lonely. And in that kind of environment, we can get quite insecure, we can lack confidence, and struggle with things, which for a little bit of support and a little bit of meeting with peers and just realizing that everybody goes through that and everybody's feeling those kind of things, and that there's more to us than that, that we have another place in our consciousness that we can go to that's deeper and truer than that insecure thinking. It's really helpful to have that. So we wanted to create this to have like a monthly space to hang out together, to explore certain key themes that we've found to be really useful. And as Ian said, the next one starts on the spring equinox. I think we start, don't we?
Can't remember. Sounds good.
And it's a 3-hour session and it takes place once a month. So if you feel drawn to that, then do get in touch with us.
Yeah. We've had a very eclectic mix of practitioners, haven't we? Which is also wonderful.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't matter what form your practice takes, because what we're addressing are the universals. It's the things that we all have in common. And it's actually been really nice to have that kind of cross-section of practitioners working from completely different backgrounds, different skill sets. And yet the common ground is we're human beings first, you know, and just bringing some, you know, shining some light on that aspect of practice, which is, it's not to do with the technicalities and the, you know, that we know that we've trained in that. We've all got our specialties. So we're not so much concerned with that in the practitioner mentoring space. It's more what's a bit further upstream of that, which is that which we all have in common, the common ground.
And we do kind of lightly introduce and explore the 3 principles in that space as well. So if you're interested in that, then that's a good launch place to go for that.
Yeah, if you've heard a little bit about it either through us or elsewhere, it's a good kind of entry level to that, I think, because we're gently drip feeding that in all the way through. So yeah, thank you, Rachel. Always nice to hang out with you.
Yes, you too. And thank you everyone for listening.